this big subject, right? The subject of depression. What is depression? Where does it come from? What causes depression? Why do some people seemingly have depression worse than other people do? How do you specifically know that you're depressed? How do you figure it out? Because from my point of view, when I was young and I first became depressed, I had no idea. I didn't know that that was what it was. I thought I had just had something wrong. I thought I was not looking after myself properly, and that was the cause of my issues. So what I'm wondering is, did I if nobody had told me that I was depressed, would I have ever known? Would I have ever figured it out on my own? Is there enough for people to see someone who's depressed, know that they are depressed, and then know to apply that to themselves, especially if they're not a professional? So if I see a friend of mine who explains they're depressed, and I've never been depressed, how do I know that they're depressed? How can I tell? And how can I tell when I am depressed based on just seeing other people that I know be depressed? I think a lot of people rely on going to a professional, which is natural. That makes sense. Of course, that you would go to a professional to find out what you feel is wrong with you, which I obviously advocate for heavily. I think that seeking therapy or even just going to a doctor just to start things off is really good if you feel like you're depressed, or if you just feel like there's something wrong with you. Like if there's something, I feel that people in maybe this country, and maybe it's just people I know or whatever, but people tend to have this detachment from wanting to seek help because they feel like they're putting people out, or that they feel like they shouldn't need to have help. But depression is very complicated. You don't always know that you're depressed, and you don't always know that the tools that you have to your disposal to deal with this issue are things that won't work, or you struggle to work. I think that people can go through depression and they can come out of it and think, I did that on my own and I'm really proud of myself. Or they can just, maybe they think, it wasn't a big deal. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I think everybody's different in that regard. I think that people's ability to deal with becoming depressed, or even just becoming depressed in the first place, like having the capability to be depressed, is very independent to people. And there's no defining factor to say, you had these things happen in your life and now you're depressed. In fact, I think I actually almost believe that there could be no reason to be depressed. I don't, it would be really great to think, we don't have these issues come up. You don't get the problem. You do have these issues come up. You do have a problem. It's easy. It's logical to look at it that way. But I feel maybe it's a bit against me in the sense that I'm training to be a counsellor. But I don't personally believe that it's always that simple. Especially in the circumstances of people who don't know exactly what has gone on in their lives to make this happen. It's very difficult. So there is always the chance that you could just become depressed. Maybe it's a genetic thing. That would also imply that there is a cause. So it's difficult to see. It's difficult to track down all of these things because it's a mental health issue. I mean, I always use the analogy of, like, if you break your leg, you know what broke your leg. You know exactly what you've done. You know where the problem is. You know where the problem's located, and you can go in and fix it. If you don't have those capabilities, then if you can't look at exactly what it is, you can't fix the problem. But you can't see depression. You might be able to, if we get really deep into some scientific terms and some neuroscience or something like that, maybe we can find the source or see where the depression is presenting, and what the effect of it has on the brain. But I don't have that kind of capability. Nobody has that kind of capability. If you was to break a leg, a professional would be able to sort it out. Oh, wow. Thank you so much for the raid, Twisty. Man, 14 people. Thank you. Welcome in so much. This is this is quite a heavy subject, guys. So apologies if you guys are going to be like, what the But thank you so much. Welcome in, everybody. I hope everyone had a good stream with Twisty. And let me know, how's your day been, guys? Please let me know what's going on with you guys. I am kind of monologuing right now, but I'll get to a point where we just have an open discussion about things. This is my big cup of tea, by the way, in case you were wondering. Ready your army. Charge! So, we were just talking about the nice dark concept of depression and the effect that it has on people. But I welcome everybody to, please talk about your experiences if you feel comfortable to, and also to, hash out some things if you feel like you need to. The idea of this is kind of a place to hash out some thoughts that you might have, and if you have something you would like to bring up, please use the highlight my message function. That way I know it's directed towards me, and it's something instead of reading through a lot of messages. If a lot of messages come through the chat, that is. Usually I get to read a few more than just the highlight messages, but this is, I think, the simplest way I could do it. I've got one here. If you're feeling down, cry in a corner or take a walk and breathe in some fresh air. That is a criminally underplayed mechanism for coping. Crying, specifically, is something that I feel like people look at as this negative sometimes. I think not as much now, but while I was growing up, it was seen as negative. I even find myself having kind of a visceral reaction to crying sometimes. Sometimes I feel like I can't do it in certain situations, but then I can very easily in other situations. I heard somebody say very recently to me, the tears will stop when they're done. And I thought that was really insightful. The idea that if you feel like you're crying a lot about something, that's fine. That is exactly what it does. Crying also relieves tension in the body, which can help ease, like, basically the symptoms of depression and feeling bad about things. Not specifically depression, but if something's negatively affected you in your life and you are upset about it, then crying actually helps to relieve a physical aspect of it, which is something else I'd like to get into. That depression is a physiological issue as well. It affects your body, so it's not just an emotional thing. It's real. It's a real thing that happens to people, and it happens to them in their brains and happens to them in their bodies. And also, the taking the walk and having a breath of fresh air is also criminally underplayed. It's just a form of self-care. All forms of self-care are good for you. In fact, in this age right now, where we are, as counsellors, and people in the mental health profession, and even in the physical health profession as well, in a lot of places, we are doing our sessions in a place where we don't. We are doing our sessions not in person. We're not doing it in a place anymore. We're doing them in our own homes, and we're doing them. Or if you're lucky enough to have like an office you can go to, you can do it from there. But we are doing them not in a practice where you'd normally go. Instead, it's video calling or phone calls, which is a completely different thing. And a big part that people miss out of therapy when they have therapy is that they have to go to the place, so they have contemplation time while they're going to counselling, and then they have contemplation time when they're going home from counselling. Whereas we're in the online world, we don't have that anymore. We don't look at we don't get that time to walk home or drive home from a place and really think about how the session's gone. I like that. Crying is really underrated. Everyone needs to cry every now and then. Like bottling things up is unhealthy. I understand that. Self-care is very important. If you feel down, tell a person you trust, or go to therapy. But what I like to do is just do stuff I like. Oh, to do stuff you like sleep or draw and listen to music. Sleep's actually incredibly important for your mental health. If you don't get enough sleep, it will affect your mental health. It's essentially a given. You need sleep to wash away certain aspects of the processes in your brain. It's actually something to do with insulin, which is really strange. People don't really consider insulin as that kind of thing. But while you're asleep, you're essentially fasting, and you use that time for processing. If you don't, your body will start having your regulated sleep pattern while you're awake, which is really strange. I've had that happen to me before, which I might go into detail about another week. Oh, and thank you so much for the congratulations on the 200. We hit 200 followers today, so thank you so much for everybody who has followed and has been a part of the channel. And it's been great. It's been so great. Thank you so much. Right. Oh, thank you for the host as well. Thank you so much. Right. Right. So, what I saw today, with the outside of the session, just with somebody else, it was in a Discord conversation. Somebody had had asked in the session, not in the session, sorry, in the Discord server, in a section for mental health that was in Danii's Discord. They'd said, "What is it like to be depressed? What does depression mean? What is it? You know, I've never had it myself, and no one I know has had it, and I found it very surprising. The idea of somebody saying, "Oh, I've never been depressed," is not that surprising. I've known adults who have gone through their lives and said, "I'm not depressed. I've never been depressed," which I believe. I remember speaking to a colleague of mine in a job I had a few years ago, and I asked him, "Have you ever been depressed?" And he said no. And I was like, "Oh wow!" And in my head, I thought, "How can you have gotten to, in your 20s and never been depressed? That seemed very strange. It seemed really mad." And then, maybe even only a few months later, that person's relationship ended up breaking up. They really felt strongly for this person, and they felt very uncertain with their life, and they ended up becoming depressed from it. And I said to them, "Do you remember when I asked you if you'd ever been depressed?" And you said no. And he said, "Yes, I remember that." I said, "Do you feel like you're depressed now?" And he said, "Yes." And he 100% knew, "Yes, I'm definitely depressed." And I could see it in him. He physically changed in appearance. His attitude was completely different. He was shut down. It was very clear to me, and to everybody else who knew him, that he was very depressed. And he knew it himself. He didn't need to be told. I asked him and he said yes. And that must have been very shocking for him. And this person was in his 20s. I don't recall his exact age, but he was younger than I am now, I think. Yes. And I just found it so, I don't know. I don't want to say unusual. I don't want to say it was strange. It was just very surreal, I suppose is the word, to see somebody become depressed for the first time in their life. And I thought to myself, I remember being depressed when I was 16, 17. That's my first time when I knew I'd been depressed. And I thought, how did you avoid teenagehood without being depressed? Seems really strange, but it obviously can happen. The person who posted in the Discord today, I asked them whether or not it was okay if we could speak about this, and they said yes. And they are, I think they're in their late teens. For them to not be depressed is fantastic. I think it's great. The thing that I got very confused about was they said, I don't know anybody who's been depressed. That implied that nobody in their life that they knew up until now has ever been depressed and could tell this person what it was like or why they became depressed in the first place. That really surprised me. I kind of almost thought, there's no way. I thought to myself, they just must have not known, because I didn't know when I first became depressed. It took somebody telling me. It took my dad saying to me, I think you're depressed. I've been depressed in my life and I think you are. And then when I went to counselling for the first time, I explained my situation and how I felt, and my counsellor said, it really does seem like you're depressed. They weren't able to diagnose me with depression, because that's not what counsellors can do. We don't do that. We're not doctors. But we can see, we know certain signs we can see to a degree. There are even some small things that I've learned to notice in people that trigger that thing off in me that says, I think you might be depressed. When this person said that they had never seen anybody depressed, that was my first thought. My first thought is they must have just not known. The people in their life were either, I made this massive assumption that the people in their lives either didn't want to believe that they were depressed, so they were in denial about it, or they had been depressed and thought, that's not depression though, because other people have got it way worse than me, which is also a completely understandable thing to think. But I have to say now that it is entirely possible that they hadn't been depressed. Of course it is. It seems unlikely to me, but it's possible. One of the things that they said, though, was that they believed that it was their love of God that was the reason that they'd never been depressed. That their acceptance of God, and that when they feel low, they can pray. And they also mentioned their family. They felt that they could speak with their family about things, and they feel like they can, they can get these things to they can work through these things. And I felt like that is obviously incredibly valuable. If you have people who you are able to talk to about these issues in a way that really helps, then that's fantastic. That's great. There was something that aspect of religion really made me question what it was about religion that made this person feel this way. And I suppose the idea that there is something, there's something out there, there's a bigger purpose, might have something to do with it. But I'm also denying the idea that there is anything else. I'm coming from it from I suppose, an agnostic point of view. I don't personally believe in that. And I think that sometimes there's the tendency to be like, you do you, man, like whatever works for you. And then that kind of, I worry about saying things like that sometimes, because I feel like it can come across as condescending. I know that it's meant well in almost every situation, but I just don't, I don't want it to seem like I'm saying, yeah, man, well, yeah, your thing that works for you, because they truly, truly believe it is real. And of course, like, why wouldn't they? I'm myself, like I said, I would be agnostic. I'm not an atheist. I don't believe that there is absolutely nothing out there. But I'm not completely convinced. But this person was passionate about how they felt about God, and I thought that is powerful. That is powerful on its own. Even if it turned out, and I don't want to say that, I don't want to even suggest that there is no God, there's no spirituality or anything like that. But even if that was the case, it still worked. It still had an effect and an impact. And I thought that was just so great. And I think that that's what people mean when they say, it's just a, whatever works for you, buddy, I just think it was very nice to see. I know that some people don't like that. And I think that they've got really good reasons for not being okay with phrases like, speak to God and God will heal you from your problems. God will heal your depression. Because they probably have an experience with religion, or they might have a written experience of religion in some way, and it did not work for them, and they say that's it, that's all I need to justify that it's untrue, and that's understandable too. In fact, I can really I probably empathise with people from that point of view stronger than people who identify with a religion or feel that their religion is the reason for it. The funny thing as well is that there's always going to be like an abouts about it, because if you don't really believe in the religion, then it's not going to work. If you don't persist with any belief, I suppose, it won't come to fruition. Which is, I think, is what a lot of people who do come from a religious background would probably tell you. You don't really believe. That's why it doesn't work. You don't really feel it in your soul, so it won't work. It won't work for you, at least. I'd be very interested to see what other people's views on that are. I know it can get quite difficult to say, so please, let's bear in mind some empathy with each other when we talk about this, if that is okay with everyone. The bot just came back to life. Interesting. I'm going to go and read some of the chat now. So, I think there was... okay. Oh, Wispy's brought us some point here. For me, the worst part of depression is how it erodes my sense of identity. Staying years and years in a state where I found nothing enjoyable really destroyed everything. The weirdest part of finally getting out of depression is the feeling of waking up and not knowing who I am. So right now, I feel very much like a teenager experiencing lots of stuff to learn more about myself. It's so weird. That's very interesting. I think that it's if you live your life with a certain set of views and opinions, or and particularly views on yourself, views on you as a person, and something happening or some work was done where you were moved out of that is like a whole new person, because you're what makes your identity? What really makes you who you are? I suppose it's the way you think about things. It's the way that you act based on how you feel. And if you feel a certain way for so long that you identify that as yourself, but you then find out, actually, this is not who I really am. Or, actually, these things in my life were wrong and I'm going to change them. I'm going to fix them. Fixing those problems changes the way that you see yourself, because you have changed your feelings around things. So that would be like meeting somebody again for the first time, except you're inside that person. Oh, and another comment here as well. It's very interesting that this person mentioned their love of God, because I feel like what helped me the most was this idea of unconditional acceptance, mainly of myself. And the way I reached that acceptance was by adopting a few spiritual perspectives. That's very interesting. I've never been a massive part of, I've never been a part of a religion specifically. But I have been very interested in Buddhism, and a lot of counsellors and a lot of people who work in the mental health field and the psychology field also look into Buddhism quite a lot, which is not as much of a spiritual aspect of things. Some people would even argue that Buddhism is not a religion because it doesn't focus on the same ideals that other religions do, or that they don't want Buddhism to be kind of tarred with the negative aspects of religion that they feel in themselves. Personally, I don't mind, but adopting certain aspects of Buddhism in my younger life really helped me with certain aspects of how I am. It really helped me with some anger issues I had when I was younger, that I kind of then lost touch of later on in my life, and I am now kind of trying to re-grasp. The idea of self-acceptance and the way in which you are is a massive part of Buddhism that I found really crosses over quite well with counselling. It was something that somebody said to me once, which is that they had a bad, well, they were really heavily identified with Buddhism, but they saw all of these end goals of Buddhism and thought to themselves, oh, and if I'm not going to be able to be like that, because that's too, that's really difficult to obtain. I will be, like, oh, I take a lot of drugs, and I do, I do things and I act in a way, and I don't practice the way that you should as a Buddhist. And they said that to somebody who they knew, who had gone through their path and gotten to the place they were in Buddhism. And they said to themselves, oh, like, they said to this person, they said, well, where are you right now? Where would you like to be? And they said, here's where I am right now, and I want to be like you. And they said, well, then that's just where you are now. You're not going to be punished for not being the person you want to be in the future right now. You're just on the path there. As long as you want to be on that path there, and you really try, then you will get there. And I found that incredibly insightful. The other aspect of things, which we talked about in the last podcast as well, I think we talked about it in the last podcast, which is the counselling in general also adopts quite a lot of Christian beliefs. In Carl Rogers himself, who developed person-centered therapy, which is what I study and what I practice, he was a Christian. He was raised Christian for his whole life, and I think he ended his life in a more agnostic viewpoint. I don't know. I think that he saw a lot of things in Christianity that he adopted to create this. And I've always said that we're all kind of trying to be a bit like Jesus, because we're all trying to be, well, as counsellors, this is an analogy. You could swap it out for any person really that you believe would, represents like the perfect human. We aren't trying to be perfect. What we're trying to do is aspire to be these people who can take things on their shoulders, take on the issues of other people, and for you to be able to have a positive impact on their lives without it essentially drowning you. Which is why if you look at religious texts about people like these Messiah figures, they have the ability to just take things on and have those problems eliminated. Whereas we know we can't do that. As humans, we know we can't do that. So we create systems and we create these places and processes where we can deal with these things. So I don't just, hear, my clients' issues, really feel them in me, and then and I can just deal with that. Yeah, I can, there's the real chance that I'll hear something that really upsets me, or I'll have to deal with something that's very shocking to me or difficult for me to deal with, and I might not have the means to be able to do these things. I might not be able to help right now. I might not have the capability to help somebody. So we have supervision, and we have line management, which is when there's somebody who essentially contacted me and gets me to go with clients, and if I feel that there's something difficult that needs to be risen with them, maybe it's a safeguarding issue or something like that, I can talk to that person. If I feel like I should have dealt with things differently, I said the wrong thing, because I am an imperfect person who will make mistakes, I will talk to my supervisor about it, and I'll use that process to learn about what I did and how I can change it. And I'll have personal therapy. I'll have my own person who does this with me, who does what I do with other people, and they do it with me. I go over things that upset me in my life, that stop me from, functioning the way that I want to, and we hash it out the same way that a client would with me, because it's that valuable. And it's very difficult for people to take on the problems of other people, know how to help that person as well, because it's not necessarily here's the answers, here's what you got to do situation. In fact, it's almost never that. It's about being able for that other person to know how you feel and deal with those issues with them, and reflect them back. Feel the way that person feels. they now know that they, build a connection, build a relationship with these people. That way, there can be some work done. If you have empathy with somebody, and you don't judge them personally for what they do, then they might be able to look at their issues and see what they've done differently. I think the aspect of no judgment is a massive part of this, and it was something as well that makes us all trying to be a bit like Jesus, I suppose. We have the ability to see the lives of other people and not judge them for it. We know that we do. That's the thing. I wouldn't hear any scenario and immediately be like, I'm fine with everything that this person's saying. I know that there are things that are going to stump me. I know that there's things that happen personally in my life that I will stop being able to listen to this person's issues, and I will be thinking about things that happen to myself. It's going to happen. It will always happen. So we'll never really be like Jesus. We just try to emulate him, I suppose, sometimes. Or, whoever it is, whoever religious figure, I suppose was put to the point of, yes, you are the person who we deem as the perfect human. Okay. Another message here from Twisted Velocity. Thank you for your message. One thing for me that makes me feel like shit is how indifferent people are when it comes to balancing forgiveness. For example, I'm quick on the uptake to forgive and say sorry for something that went wrong, but I rarely, almost never receive that same way of treatment. This is a really heavy imbalance in my life that I absolutely have to change and want to change, but my forgiveness is just a part of who I am. Okay. So reading that, I have this feel, it brings up this feeling in me. It makes me feel like the imbalance implies that your forgiveness is on a scale. And when you put something on, the only way that it can match back up again is by other people contributing. The thing that I think about when I hear that is that implies that you're that this tendency needs to be externally verified in the same way, which is very different. It's an interesting conversation, depression, because it's something that we, a lot of us experience. But as I said earlier on in the stream, not all of us do experience it as well. It's very different, and it's very strange to see things through the eyes of somebody who might not have experienced depression yet. But going back to this comment here that Twisted Velocity put up, that to me, it implies this thing called an external locus of evaluation, which means that your feelings behind where you are, like where you are mentally, are determined by other people. And I can see there's a tendency to think, well, if I try to retract that feeling in myself, for example, my feeling of forgiveness, because it's not being weighed up. If I retract that, then it'll make the situation better because I didn't do that for myself. Foxy Lady, thank you so much for the follow. So we have, what does that mean here? Would that really work? It might do. It might not. If we have a tendency to forgive a lot because that's what we like, that's what we want to do. We want to forgive people. Taking that away, what would that mean for that person? What does that mean? Do we have, any reason to not forgive anymore? I don't know. What does it really mean? I think that's something that we could, if you feel like that, then maybe you could look into. So, I'd like to ask the chat, is there anyone here who feels that they have never experienced any form of depression or any other mental health condition, any mental health experience, and I'd like to hear what you feel about those subjects. Like, what is it that you think about? Because I would like to see what other people's understanding of it is. Oh, thank you so much, Peter, for the follow. Welcome on in. I've got the tendency, I suppose, for myself, to look at depression in this, I suppose, what's a good way to explain it? I'm looking at it through my eyes, how it's affected me, but with the knowledge that could be completely wrong. Or like not wrong, but different to other people. I might not experience depression the same way other people do, but we all tend to have similar experiences of it. If I had never been depressed, and if I kind of think about a time back in my life when I hadn't been depressed, but I had seen other people be depressed, I would look at it very differently to the way that I look at it now. I'm very curious to see other people's, and also, if you are okay to say as well, I'd like to know how old you are, only because I don't think it really means anything in terms of how far, if you've gotten to this age, you should have been depressed by now, or you can't be depressed if you're young. I don't believe that at all. I think that actually, a lot of young children can experience depression in ways that they don't understand, and it's very difficult for adults to look in on, even as parents. So I would be very interested to see if somebody could identify what they feel it would be like for them. But yeah, anyway, if we look at this aspect of religion again, I really want to go over this again, because I've known religious people to become depressed, so it doesn't imply necessarily that if you are religious, you won't get depressed. So that kind of points you towards the whole, it doesn't mean anything, that the religion's not going to save you from depression. I don't personally, like I've said already, I don't personally believe that. What I do believe is that there's got to be something about it that works for some people, but there's also got to be situations that we really need to deal with internally. We need to say to ourselves, I need to work on this. And that is, unfortunately, for a lot of people, the hardest part about depression, which is the forcing yourself up and getting yourself out there, identifying what it is that's wrong with you, and getting the help if you need it. I said very early on in the podcast that it's not a it's not a yes, you will get I've lost my train of thought, I apologise. Welcome in anyone who's come in new, by the way. Thank you so much, Ethan, for coming in. So if we oh, sorry, I remember what I was going to say now. I remember now. It was that it's difficult for us to focus and identify our issues and work on them if we don't know about it already, if we don't know that it exists. And there's the mental energy it takes to even get the help in the first place is difficult. Sometimes we do have the tools to deal with these things. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we might feel like we do, and we cope in certain ways, but they might not necessarily be the best way. I just think that was worth mentioning, because I've seen a lot of people in my life who deal with things in ways that they probably isn't very good for them, and sometimes they just don't cope with things, and that results in some things, some terrible things happening to them. And how are you? I'm very fine, thank you. If you have anything you would like to discuss with us, by the way, please use the highlight my message function in the channel points, and I will get to it when I can. But answering this, Zidric, I don't think I've been depressed. And Splat Gaming, I don't think... but I've had some really... I've had really sad... I've been really sad sometimes. So there's a big difference there, really, I suppose, isn't it? What is depression? Oh, thank you so much for the follow. What is the difference between being depressed and being sad? Sad is a natural reaction to things that happen in your life. It's just... There are things that happen to you that make you sad. Of course they do. What do we, do about that? I'm not sure, Sadness, I feel like, is just an emotion. I'm having a reaction that has sapped me of positive feeling, and I will feel the feeling of sadness. Depression is when you have a whole systematic closing down of the way in which that you usually emotionally deal with things, or you usually emotionally cope with certain situations, or the way that you think about things. So there's lots of different types of therapy that deal with things in different ways. Sometimes when we have negative impacts on our life and we start to consider them very negatively, that could be a cognitive thing going on. We have a cause, and then we can change that, and then we can make adjustments to the way that we think about things, and that will hopefully change the problem. There are other times when we've got issues with maybe the way that we're built, our building blocks of coping, learned from childhood or from role models in our lives, that make us deal with things in really strange ways, or ways that we don't really want to, but we do, and we have even convinced ourselves that that's the natural and normal way of coping with things. And it takes a lot of effort and a lot of internal reflection to really associate those things. A very classic way of coping is to take things like mind-altering substances, drinking, drugs, and other forms of escapism. That might not, there's a lot of people say that can cause depression. I would argue that that's a reaction to a mental health condition, because I think it's, because I feel like there's an escapism there that needs to happen. Everybody is different. I could never say that, but I feel that breaking down the reasons behind why you might cope in certain ways, and looking at the reasons why that coping mechanism has even been implemented in the first place, is like hitting it at foundations, isn't it? It's like, okay, so we can fix the burning building up here by splashing a load of water on it, but the fire's coming from down here. This is where the cause of the fire is coming from. So if we hit the fire where it's starting, we can stop the building from burning up there. There might still be some damage, and there still might be some things that you need to deal with up there, but it'll never go away if we just alter the ways in which we deal with things going on up here. Up here is where we really consider, we thoughtfully consider things. But then there's the realm underneath, isn't there? There's I reacted that way for a reason. What was that reason? These are the things that I feel like people don't consider as much when they think about their own depression, and in the depression of other people as well. I've seen here a question: is it normal to be in depression at 13 years? It can be. I don't think that there's an unnatural way of being depressed. It's there's never a time. I don't think anyone can be too young to be depressed. Children can be depressed. Adults can be depressed. But adults can go through their whole lives never being depressed, and then be depressed later in life. There is, I've heard of people who are in their, their very old age experiencing depression for the first time. Whether or not they really were experiencing it for the first time, or it's just the only time they're able to identify it as depression, is a different thing. Another thing that I feel a tendency for people to do is, and it's easy to see this from the outside, is once somebody's been depressed, they seem to be depressed more. I don't know if that's a real thing, But I feel like a part of that might just be your ability to identify that is depression. So if you have a depressive tendency, then it could be, oh, well, you're just depressed a lot because you just get depressed a lot. But actually, you might just be able to identify it a little bit better. So that's something I'd like for people to consider when they see other people with depression. If we can take one thing away from today, is that if you see somebody with depression, or you feel like you've been depressed, or other people in your life are experiencing depression, to really try to understand what it is from their perspective. I think that's incredibly valuable. It's what we as counsellors train to do, to really try to see things from other people's perspective, and to try to not put your own, your own frame of reference onto another person's experience and assume that will help. So I said at the beginning this was going to be a bit of a shorter one. I will be coming back again to do this in a couple of weeks. I don't know if it'll be like this. I don't know if I have a guest. Please let me know if you've enjoyed this type of podcast, because usually I have Danii with me or I have a guest, and this has been pretty freeboard, not gonna lie. I kind of didn't have anything written down or planned this time. Usually I have some talking points set up that we discuss over the time, or it's very much led by the guest. And let me know what you guys think. Obviously I won't be talking about depression every single week. Maybe we'll talk about some other things, some maybe lighter subjects, maybe, I don't know, we'll talk about what people want to talk about, I suppose. It'd be interesting to see what you guys think. Thank you so much for coming. I don't normally raid after